slight change. Arena from Everstake could not make it out due to passport expiration and travel issues. So Pavel from P2P has graciously decided to join us for his perspective on preconfs from a validator's side of things. But yeah, this is a validator perspective on preconfs. I guess to start off, I'd love to go through the list and have you guys introduce yourselves and who you are, what you do, and yeah, your background. I guess we'll start with you, Darren.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, that's better. So I am Darren. I am the general manager of the Rocket Pool core team. So Rocket Pool is a decentralized liquid staking protocol. We're staking around 750,000 ETH across 3,000 node operators in about 90 different geographic regions. And yeah, it's good to be here. Great to put across our point of view.
Hello. My name is Pavel. I'm here from P2P. I'm basically a researcher. I'm mainly focused on block space markets and restaking, so doing quite a lot of different things. So about P2P, we are the largest staking provider that works across many networks, Ethereum, Solana, and others, and we are the largest operator in Eigenlayer, basically. I guess that's it.
Awesome. My name is Drew Vanwerf, working on a project called Commit Boost. It's a new sidecar to help unify standards so validators run one sidecar and can opt into all the pre-comp protocols, for example. It's a public good, fully open source, no monetization, fully grant-backed, no venture funding. It's built so anyone can build on top of it and all stakers can run it. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm Michael. I'm head of research at Chorus One. We are a node operator with probably around 3 billion in stake across 52 chains. We've published a fair amount of research that has gotten some traction, like on MEV mitigation on DYDX v4, on private order flow dynamics, on timing games. And we've been running various preconfirmations protocols for a really long time now, relatively speaking.
Hi, my name is Joshua. So I lead the product for protocol on Mental Network, or Mental. So we are the fourth largest layer 2 rollup in the Ethereum ecosystem, just under Base, Optimism, and Arbitrum. We also have an L1 liquid staking protocol called MEV protocol, and we have about 500,000 ETH over many validators. Using multiple operators. So for example, P2P is one of the key operators in the ecosystem. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. We'll start kind of general. What has been your experience working with various pre-conf flavors? I know we're still in the early days of these things, but maybe even from a theoretical perspective, some of the concerns and or opportunities that you see that this is going to unlock from a validator yield and a validator opportunity perspective, and whoever wants to start.
Yeah, sure. So I'm happy to kick it off. Well, to start with the latter end of your question, I think the yield is at the end of the day a function of flow, and I think here we'll just have to wait. I think most projections at this point are purely assumption-based, and I would be hard-pressed to put a confidence interval around a yield number, which I think is reasonable. I think in general terms, we've worked with proposal inclusion preconfirmations. We've also worked with Primev. Across the board, we feel like the tech has been progressing at a very fast pace. We also ran Commit Boost since Berlin and feel very good about where that's at. Overall, I would say the technology is in a good place. And then really to tie it back again, I think now it's about finding the best possible use case and then building the overall case from there.
From our perspective, we're extremely new to this. So we've been engaging with a number of providers to kind of essentially educate ourselves on the trade-offs and the kind of the technicalities around how it could be implemented. We have to. I have to kind of say this from a protocol perspective and a node operator community perspective, because so we're a decentralized protocol. So all of our node operators are, we have a certain amount of autonomy with our node operators. So we actually have to kind of like educate them on the trade-offs and the rewards and that sort of thing. And so it wouldn't be whole-scale adoption. They would kind of like take it on a per node operator basis. So that's kind of like a different thing for us. It's much more about educating our node operators.
To follow up there, have you started those conversations with your community? Has that come up naturally? How have those conversations been progressing? Because you're not the only kind of protocol or operation that's in that position specifically.
So it's a little bit of both in the sense that our node operators are extremely switched on. So often they'll come to us with things that they're further ahead than we are. And in other cases, they're not. So it's more about kind of like absorbing all that knowledge and then making sure that we distill it down to the most important things and get that information out to the rest of the community that haven't quite caught up with the kind of leading node operators.
Are you looking to create almost a unified position from like Rocket Pool's standpoint of one flavor? Or are you looking to allow support from your node operators across these things?
So we will probably, from a protocol perspective, I think we will be keen to use some sort of pre-confirmation process, mainly because we want to maximize the yield on our ETH. But we have this kind of like trade-off within Rocket Pool in the sense that node operator autonomy is more important. So it means that they can choose how they want. So we wouldn't mandate one particular flavor. We would, like similar to what we do with the different clients, we provide access to all of them within our kind of like software platform, so that they can pick and choose how they want to kind of play it. And some might not want to, but some might, and various degrees spectrum on the set.
And not to riddle Darren, if anyone has a perspective there.
I was going to say, I'm not a validator, but from my perspective, preconfs and generally based commitments, or the ability for proposers to put constraints around how their block is constructed, is this paradigm shift from what we've had in MevBoost, where you fully auction the rights to stack, construct, and build a block, and giving it back to the proposer. Validation, people say this, it's commoditized business. This in some ways is giving the ability to provide services to Ethereum's users, which is a very high value add, or at least a place where you can sit and say, hey, if I'm helping you build L2 a better product for your end users, you'll pay me some yield for that. And so I think overall, all validators should be at least leaning in to explore these things. And generally, their perception's been good, even if the yield can't have some confidence interval around it yet.
Yeah. I think I could add up on Drew's point. So we in P2P are trying to help as many preconf protocols as we can. We are working, I guess, with most of them. For us, all of them have their unique edge, unique problem they solve. And like Drew mentioned, some of them, for example, both, they offer some flexibility over block construction, like partial block building, so that validator actually can influence the contents of the block. And for example, ETHGAS is working on something that will accelerate yield because of block space trading, and Primev generally working about commitments inside MEV Boost ecosystem. So we're trying to look at all of them, compare them, figure out the risks, and the most important point here is that we also should think about our clients, because in the end, they own this block space and they delegate us the operations of their capital, and we should educate them, provide them confidence that they work with the protocol and they don't get slashed for nothing, for example.
To that point, how are pre-confirmations affecting your operational overhead, your requirements as validator operators, and those that would work with you, your stakers, and any challenges that have arisen or that you're seeing as a result of that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to kick it off. Well, I think there's two sides to it. One is just running the infrastructure. And then I think the other side to it is running the infrastructure optimally. And I think there's a little bit of a gap there. I think generally running the infrastructure at this point is quite straightforward. for all of the major solutions out there. Then I think in terms of running it optimally, there's two components there that people are not yet super opinionated on. One is things like timing games in the context of preconfirmations. And I think, if we just build a quick taxonomy, for builder preconfirmations, it's probably an extension of what you currently see. And then I think for proposer preconfirmations, it's still a little bit less certain. But I imagine there would be a timing game there as well, albeit slightly less pronounced, because these transactions typically wouldn't touch contentious state. And then secondly, on the pricing side of things, I think there's also something to be said there, right? For proposer preconfirmations, there may be a natural scenario where the proposer has some idea of, is this transaction very low? Is it high compared to what I expect the EV to be if I wait until my slot? And then I think even in the builder preconfirmation case, via things like proposer commitments that Primev has been exploring, I think there's also room there for the proposer to bring in some degree of sophistication and make sure that it does pay as well as they can.
Resulting concerns, I guess, both from the additional requirements or outside of that you guys see as operators?
There are a lot of sidecars, somewhat of the goal of commit boost, but we're not the only solution out there. I think everyone has recognized having 5 to 10 sidecars isn't healthy for Ethereum or teams, and at least we're pushing the conversation forward. Even if commit boost isn't the solution, I think it's critical for Ethereum and for validators generally.
I mean, from our perspective, we have a very broad spectrum of node operator. So everything from a home staker all the way up to something as like a professional operator. So they have very different, profiles, both in terms of bandwidth and also the machines that they're running on and all that sort of thing. So we have to kind of bear that in mind whenever we introduce anything. And I know that like latency and that sort of thing is a massive issue particularly for some of the node operators on in different regions. So that's definitely something that we're kind of very mindful of in terms of that.
So I think for Mental, we don't directly run those validators, right? So we rely on very sophisticated operators. I think it's almost like a look and see approach right now for us, right? Our major concerns, I think, are already covered in, like, probably even the previous panel on the different flavors is, there's different security assumptions and even technical assumptions that we can then develop a framework over so that we can better allocate into the various operators that are working on this. And of course, a lot of this is just like, yield optimization and risk-adjusted yield optimization. I think one of the open areas that we definitely will even be more keen to know more about is like the flexibility over the different, to redeploy capital over various amounts of flavors, right? Because that will also be a way forward that probably would be necessary, right? If there are too many sidecars, as you said, yeah.
From a testing and adoption standpoint, do you foresee yourself working with multiple flavors out of the gate, and essentially, what is your market approach to some of this from that perspective, since there is a variety of options for pre-confirmation flavors?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think we've been testing all of the major flavors at this point. I think it's very important to have a clear and a detailed overview of the landscape, because it is emerging, but it's also very promising. So I think testing as much as we can at this point, and then settling on with which of these we will go to mainnet, is something that we are dedicating a lot of time to at the moment, and I would expect that to have good returns on investment. Yeah.
So from our perspective, it will be community driven. So we wouldn't. I think we'd probably prefer to give all flavors a chance within the software. But to be honest, a lot of our stuff is community driven. So the community tell us what they actually want.
from an evaluation standpoint of those flavors, are you looking, obviously yield is probably the biggest one, but are there other, you mentioned flexibility. I'd be keen to hear your takes on kind of what you're looking for in terms of, yeah, performance. What other aspects in terms of evaluating these different opportunities and different flavors are you considering? Like,
so from us, it's probably liveness. I mean, it's similar to how we were evaluating relays back in the day. So it's kind of, it's liveness, it's OFAC compliance, or OFLAC, yeah. How they handle those transactions. It's that kind of ethical stuff as well, or between MEV types. I don't know whether that is affected because it's using similar builders and that sort of thing, but that's the way that we would kind of be looking at it.
yeah, in a general sense, like the risk-reward profiling for some of this stuff, I guess, and your perspectives on that.
I think one of the most important things here is that those protocols should be objectively slashable. I mean, there should be no room for social consensus, and everything should be reported in some way and, I mean, logged, and there should be proof that violation took place. And from our perspective, in some architectures, there might be cases that, for example, relay couldn't fulfill the delivery of the preconfirmation to a block builder, and for some reason the preconfirmation stuck in the middle of the way, and in the end we got slashed because of not our fault. And I guess in the process of the development, or the process of the research and building the ultimate, or not ultimate, but the set of ultimate preconfirmation protocols, we will ensure that that will not happen, or at least we will accept the right ways to mediate such cases.
Is there anything that you guys have not seen or are looking for out of these like protocols in terms of evaluating the opportunity, the kind of the risk, I guess the trade-offs to some extent?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a couple of very practical questions. For example, when you talk about proposer inclusion preconfirmations, what is the size of the collateral, right, that the proposer would put up? Okay, so we've seen proposals ranging from 1 ETH by Justin Drake up to 1,000 ETH, also by Justin Drake. And so I think where that lands, that's very important. Then another thing, which really I think is the defining question, is users. Right. And I think that also takes back to the previous questions, what are some things to look for? I think it will be very important for there to be a clearly communicated case for these preconfirmations protocol in terms of who uses them and why people do that, right? It might be based rollups, it might be a UX thing, but I think this has to be super clearly articulated, and I think we are not quite there yet.
I would love more clarity, especially in the industry, around like how things are being solved on the principal agent problem, right? Because you put up that 1 ETH, like, but who exactly puts up that 1 ETH, and whether that there may be conflicts of interest, because and each protocol has unique designs over this. Right now, it feels very much like you need to be a deep researcher to figure this out. And for us, our liquid staking protocol is always about simplicity, right? So I can't be possibly explaining any of this to where the yield comes from. And so a lot of this simplicity and nomenclature is something I'm like, that will be my request, right?
Constant problem in our space is the language and the semantics, the nomenclature used, for sure. Awesome. I think in the interest of time and a little bit of program overrun, unless there's other topics you guys want to touch on, I'd love to open it up to the audience too and let this conversation continue in that capacity too. Does anyone have questions for these gentlemen?
Thanks for the discussion. Maybe more of a question for Drew specifically. What type of demand have you been seeing in terms of some of the teams building? Is it more based preconfs, or are people also looking at L1 execution preconfs, inclusion preconfs, et cetera?
I think execution is very hard. So there's interest and there's clear demand from a set of participants, but inclusion's easy, and there's still a theoretical demand from those that are there. I was going to say on the last, I mean, it's kind of an acceleration view. We're very focused on preconfs, but there are a whole host of things you can do when you can get proposers to commit to things. And it, even just fixing today's challenges around blob management within Ethereum, there's things you can do to improve the network itself. If you can get enough of the validators to sort of, we think about it as modules, but all these teams can start layering these additional commitments on top of how a block must be constructed. And Vitalik in a recent post even highlighted some things that he'd like to see in the future that proposers do, all the way from running new software for chat apps to a whole host of other things he highlighted. So I think the sky is the limit, and I wish we'd also talk about those use cases, I guess.
Question for the validators and node operators mainly. How do you see the sort of two designs? Like one is the gateway proposal with delegation, and one is the validators and the node operators run it themselves. How do you guys feel about the trade-offs there? And is delegating to a gateway something that you would do, or is because the operational overhead is too high, or would you rather run things yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I think we would be willing to run things ourselves, but I think if in aggregate, if you look at the entire validator set, there might be a tendency to go with a gateway design because of the simplicity that brings. Here specifically, I think there's a concern around centralization, right? Because a gateway, it would not be an auction, it would not be a spot market per se. I think most of the design proposals that I have seen would involve somebody opting into a certain gateway. And then you, of course, have a dynamic where the larger a gateway is, the more, they call it private flow, they will have, right? There will be returns to scale, which then allows this gateway to price most competitively and, again, gain more validator support. So I think this would be one concern, which I think is still out in the open. Just generally to tie it back to the question, yeah, we've looked at pricing, so we would be happy to do this ourselves, but then again, if there's a professional gateway that brings private flow, then I think we would also be looking at ways of interfacing there. Yeah.
I'll add here that I guess this problem is very similar to what PBS is trying to solve. So like this is just another opportunity to scale your business, to grow your competence in some area that is outside just infrastructure. And apparently, like you could do this also by building blocks. And to some extent, pricing, preconfirmation, and block building has the same skill set inherently. And yeah, there will be some sophisticated entities. It's just, you can imagine as if some node operator is also a block builder. I guess this gives like approximation of the picture.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Back to the inclusion versus execution preconf, do you think there's a big enough market from the inclusion preconf perspective, or do you think we eventually need to solve for the execution side to really fulfill the full potential of these things?
I mean, yeah, on both sides. Generally, though, to Michael's point earlier, these are new primitives. If you look at traditional commodity markets, this is how the market evolves, exactly what we're seeing today. So I'm confident these will provide values both for the supplier and the demand side, but at TBD, I think inclusion, I mean, you just saw the Tyco, there's one customer right there. On the execution side, you have just a whole host of people who want oracles. There's a ton of things that you could really benefit from some conditional logic within execution preconf, even on L1.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you guys want to chat with these guys, find them outside.